Good evening and welcome to Spanish United Radio. I'm your host, Enrique Sanchez. We have a special guest tonight. Would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, my name is Ida Ashouri, and I'm running for Los Angeles City Attorney. I've been a public interest attorney for more than a decade and a human rights activist for 25 years. I'm an immigrant. I was raised in working class neighborhoods from a single mother, and I'm about basically representing the people and not the billionaires and making sure that the office works for the people and that we implement criminal justice reform, make sure that renters and workers are protected and make sure that the office is working for the people and not current as it is currently the landlords.
Welcome. Thank you for being on the show, Ida.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I know that we met during the Field to Burn Zoom, so give us a little bit on your run for city attorney. What are your positions and what are your goals if you were to be elected as city attorney of Los Angeles?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I've been an attorney for a while now, and I actually worked in the city attorney's office, LA and in San Diego, not that long after I graduated from law school, and I worked as a deputy city attorney in the criminal division and uh, in prosecuting crimes ranging from DUIs to domestic violence. And that's where I actually saw firsthand the fact that these offices, well, specifically LA, didn't have much leadership. And it's because we have had a string of city attorneys that don't have any criminal justice experience. They haven't even done a single trial in their life, and they don't even know how the system works from the inside. And because of that, they don't know how to run that section. And so there was no leadership or no, like guiding principles or policies in that division. And so as a result, I saw pervasive racial profiling cases being filed, criminalization of poverty cases being filed. And, it wastes the taxpayers' dollars and it wastes a lot of people's time who have to be called in for jury duty for these cases. So that motivated me to run for office because I have that experience and I want to change the office to work for the people. So one of the biggest things I want to do is actually to make sure that we're only filing cases that actually are properly investigated, that don't show any indications of any misconduct. And that actually can lead to reductions in liability settlements because a bulk of the lawsuits that are brought against the city are because of violations of constitutional rights. And that happens when people are racially profiled, or other misconduct happens. And so I want to make sure that one, all the deputy city attorneys are trained to recognize these types of violations, and that I have a policy in place that we don't file cases that show any of those types of violations. The other thing that I saw when I was at the city attorney's office was that people who were actually in need of our services, which were sexual violence and domestic violence survivors, were being often overlooked. And that's because most prosecutors' offices are really focused on just convictions.
Right.
And they think that these cases are too difficult to deal with and complicated, and so they often would not invest in a lot of time in them to the detriment of the survivors. And my focus would be twofold. One, I want to actually hire social workers so that way these victims or these survivors are given services because right now domestic violence is a leading cause of homelessness in Los Angeles. And
Hmm.
if we can connect people with these services, one, like we're preventing that from happening because a lot of women, or people can't leave their partners because of income or household, are tied to that partner. So connecting them with services can be a good way for people to find, better living situations, but also just to make sure that that person is whole because not everybody is comfortable with going through a trial, and going through that process. And we still
Right.
want to make sure people are helped. That's just two things on the criminal side. And I'm also a housing rights attorney. For years, I was helping renters and legal aid who are facing eviction and as well as actually small businesses who are facing eviction and poor conditions in their homes. And and helping people in eviction court and also investigating these homes for litigation. And I noticed that our city attorney's office wasn't really doing anything to help these people.
Right.
And I noticed in cities in other parts of the state, like Oakland and Berkeley and Alameda, we're actually helping those the renters, and that our city attorney's office can actually do a lot more to help renters. And that's one thing I would want to do. The current city attorney actually closed the office, the code enforcement unit that would investigate these types of cases. And that's one thing I would want to do is reopen that and make sure we have an office focused on tenant rights
Hmm.
and helping tenants that are facing these issues with their landlords. Um, and the other thing I want to do, something that already the city attorney's office is doing is investigating workplace violations, wage theft violations, and that's something I would want to continue to do and expand. And another, two other really big things is I'm actually a cyclist, and I think everybody should be able to take whatever form of transportation they want. But right now, our city is the capital for hit and runs in the country,
Right.
and it shouldn't be that way. And so, one thing I want to focus on is reducing that, and also making sure we're implementing Measure HLA, which would allow for more bus and bike lanes to be built in our city. And then I'll end with this thing. I have obviously a lot of ideas, but protecting the right to protest. I'm a
Hmm.
longtime activist, and right now our right to protest has come under threat, not just at the federal level, but even in city council, where people have council members have even brought in motions to restrict and our right to protest. And
Hmm.
I, as the city attorney and the legal advisor to the mayor, to the city council, to all the departments and commissions, will stand up for that right and make sure that they are not allowed to restrict that right because it's in our Bill of Rights, and they should not be able to restrict or impair our right to protest, and make sure that stand up with the people. And in terms of if there's ever like the issue with the journalists and the LAPD,
Hmm.
were trying to restrict that right when it came to journalists. So I would make sure to side with the people and the journalists in that situation. So these are all, my goals are to reform the criminal justice section, to make sure it's working for the people, and make sure that we have safe streets and protect our rights to protest, and also protect renters and workers.
Right, absolutely. I'm the same way. Spanish United, we started five years ago. We are a civil rights organization for Hispanic people. I myself am a community leader, activist for the community. It can be very stressful, like particularly in the case of the Hispanic community. Even though we are a large demographic, we tend to be underrepresented and underserved. And many Hispanics tend to fall under the cracks. Like you actually mentioned a good point because there was a case a couple of years ago where I dealt with a young man where he was taken to the city attorney's office in San Fernando, and just because he was Hispanic and didn't get the proper due process, he was forced to take a no contest deal, and the woman was the aggressor, and that's something that I've seen in many cases where many people have been taken to court without even knowing the charges, and then many of them, because they're poor or don't have well at that time they didn't have they at that time they had the cash bail system. Now they don't, but back then they had it. So many people have been forced to take plea deals which they don't want to take, just the fact that they don't want to be incarcerated, and that needs to be changed because the purpose of the city attorney's office is to exercise justice, and at the same time, they need to investigate to make sure that there is merit to even take a case to trial, because many malicious people, they use the courts to exact revenge on people, and then it just hurts people, innocent people, and then it's a complete waste of resources which can be used for other things. Another thing I was also wanting to mention that as far as housing, I deal with a lot of cases of people that are on the street, many of them people of color, and they tell me that because there is no rent control in many places, and the fact that the landlords have a lot of power, a lot of people have ended up displaced, and then many people don't have access to resources. So I think it's very important that there needs to be accountability and there needs to be consequences for malicious landlords that want to evict people just because they want to raise the rent and make a profit. And also I'm also a cyclist myself. There needs to be more implementation or zoning for people to use bicycles or scooters because many people have to use alternative forms of transportation because they have no way of getting to work. And you did mention a point that, we are number one in hit and run. So, many Hispanic people that are cyclists or ride mopeds, they tend to be the biggest victims when it comes to hit and runs.
Yeah, so let me go backwards there. And Black and brown communities are the highest victims of hit and runs and just traffic violence because their communities are often designed to be pass-through communities. Their streets are wider, they're more dangerous, they don't have as much infrastructure, and they're overlooked by the city. And the Measure HLA, which was passed by voters, basically mandates that when the city repaves a street, it needs to implement certain measures that were already actually agreed upon by the city in 2015, but the city was not implementing them. But there'd be like, wider sidewalks or bike lanes or bus lanes. And right now, the city's trying to avoid doing that by only repaving small portions that doesn't trigger the law. And the city attorney is saying this is okay to do and not enforcing or putting pressure on these departments to actually follow the law. And so that's something that I would want to work on because I want to make sure that this law, which the voters, I actually helped gather signatures for this petition to go on the ballot for us to vote on it. And so the fact that the city is not implementing it, it also kind of discourages public participation, civic participation, right? Because we did so much work to get this on the ballot and voted on it. So I want to make sure that the city is actually following laws that the people voted in on. And that's something that will obviously, create safer infrastructure, but also making sure that these laws are fairly enforced when it comes to people using their cars aggressively against other people. I mean, I was just on a bike ride during Thanksgiving, um, and a woman in a car purposely used her car to hit a cyclist who she just wasn't unhappy with us being on the road. And that's a very aggressive crime, and nobody should be free to use their vehicle as a weapon. But also just at a basic level, I can use my office to inform and educate people. And that's something I want to do as well about like the rules around cyclists, the fact that you have to pass, at least 3 feet around a cyclist when you pass them. If there's multiple lanes, you have to change lanes to pass a cyclist. And just these small things, I think, will increase, humanizing people who are riding bikes because we're all just people trying to get somewhere. And I agree, a lot of working class people are actually, they need to be able to utilize different modes of transportation. Um, and so that's really important. And actually, like, that's also a scene of sometimes police misconduct because uh, brown cyclists are 4 times as likely to be searched than anyone else.
Hmm.
And that's something as a city attorney, the city attorney has so much power as a chief prosecutor for misdemeanors in Los Angeles by simply not filing cases. Like I was talking about earlier, the city attorney can shield or flex their power by saying, basically to the officer, this is not okay to, bring cases like this that have not been properly investigated that show racial profiling. I'm not going to file this case. And so that's a way for the city attorney to assert that we need better standards coming from the police in terms of investigation and making sure that our community is protected. Regarding the landlords, that's definitely something that the city attorney's office can do. There's something called the tenant anti-harassment ordinance. And I actually, as a legal aid attorney, I've been at numerous clinics at Sage and LA Can, both community centers, where I actually met with tenants who were facing harassment and threats of eviction by their landlords. And I know personally friends as well who have been dealing with this. And the city attorney's office can actually use that statute to pursue fines or lawsuits against these landlords who are harassing their tenants or trying to push them out in order to, get more money from another tenant or something like that. So that's something the city attorney can definitely help with. So yeah, the city attorney has a lot of power and ability to actually make our community safer and more equitable, so people feel that they have someone that has their back in City Hall, as a renter, as a cyclist, as a regular Angelino. And that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that I am a representative that makes sure that everybody's taken care of and has a voice in City Hall.
Yeah, because the one of the reason why people don't want to even get involved or even say anything because they feel that the city attorney's office tends to be distant and it's not serving its purpose. Like I've seen so many cases with so many people that have been washed up through the system or they just don't have faith in the system at all. And unfortunately, when one loses faith in the system that is there to exclusively serve the interests of the public, it can start to get corrupted. Like again, there needs to be accountability and there also needs to be oversight. And I also feel that the city attorney's office needs to be more democratic, even though, city attorneys are voted in or they are replaced, but there needs to be more oversight when they are not fulfilling their duties as city attorney, because the city attorney, as with any public servant, is a public servant. They're there to serve the interests of the public, and that's something that needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, there's two issues here. One, there's too much money in politics now.
Right.
And, Citizens United and other things, there's a lot of dark money. The current city attorney got $250,000 from a single landlord that's responsible for the biggest eviction that I think we've had in history or something in
Really? Wow.
Barrington Plaza. Yes, she got it from Douglas Emmett. And that just shows you, that she is working for landlords because she doesn't prosecute, slumlords. And she actually has said she doesn't want to pursue ethics violations, even though that's the city attorney's job. She hasn't been investigating them. She also hasn't been investigating, people who have donated to her campaign. So there's like a lot of corruption there. And I completely agree. Like we should hold them accountable. I think one thing the city council could do if they wanted to is they could actually censure her by holding a vote, which sends a message, but they haven't done that. Um, but the next step they can do is vote her out. And that's why I'm running, because we don't want a city attorney that isn't following ethics and, is being bankrolled by the landlord, this like corrupt landlord. And we really, I'm running a completely grassroots campaign because my goal is I want to be accountable to the people and not special interests, not rich corporate executives, or rich corporate lawyers. My goal is to be accountable to grassroots activists. And that's basically my donor base right now. And I have the lowest average donation of any of the other candidates because of that. So that is my goal. And I think it's really important that we get money out of politics. We limit the amount of campaign financing there is, because that's why we've been electing people who just aren't accountable to the people. They end up, helping their funders or special interests and they don't listen to us. And my goal is to be a voice for the people and to stand up for everyone in City Hall.
Oh, absolutely. It's the same thing with Spanish United. Like Spanish United, we are completely grassroots. We don't take money from corporations or from or from donors that want to influence, because I feel that it would pretty much disrupt the mission. That's one of the reasons why we are one of the very small Latino organizations that you don't really hear much about, but we do exist. And I, as a community leader, even though I'm not a politician, and even though many people want me to run for office, but I feel that my goal is to serve the community because I feel that I could serve the community better. But it is very important that to keep money out of politics because, when money is not in politics, they cannot influence a candidate or influence a particular campaign because that's been the problem with all of the um, all of the campaigns or people running for office. And unfortunately, they put in money to get the candidate to do what they want them to do instead of serving the interests of the public. And like you said, the city attorney's office is there to serve the interests of the public. It's not there as a place just to get convictions and to massively incarcerate people because it serves no purpose. Like I remember when I had a conversation with Mr. Hodgman on my program. I don't know if he was 100% true. He had mentioned that he wanted to do like a middle approach, like not necessarily lock people up, but also have people held accountable. So getting back to U.S. City Attorney, because I know the City Attorney is like one step below the District Attorney's office. So the City Attorney's office, they most handle like misdemeanor cases, not so much felony cases. Am I correct?
Correct. They prosecute every single misdemeanor in the city of LA, which is actually the bulk of LAPD, the vast bulk of LAPD arrests.
Yeah, because I know that many people are getting arrested for misdemeanors, and I feel that unless it's a misdemeanor that is 100% should be, prosecuted, with jail time. I feel that, there needs to be reforms, depending on the severity of the case, like let it be community service or let it be some type of rehabilitation because again, getting people convicted and then ruining their records for a long time, it's detrimental to society because even if someone gets out of probation or they get out of jail, uh, once they have a record, it's difficult for them to even get basic necessities met, and then they go back to doing what they were doing previously, and then it becomes a revolving door. That revolving door needs to be shut because it serves no purpose. People have to be prosecuted when they commit crimes. Absolutely, it doesn't matter if it's a city attorney or district attorney, but there cannot be people being locked up, without being properly investigated because again it hurts people. It hurts particularly people of color. And like I mentioned with that case of that young man, even though he was able to clean up his record, just the fact that he was dragged into court, especially when it was no fault of his own, it just shows that the system has flaws and a lot of innocent people fall into the cracks.
Yeah, I think definitely that like convictions and prosecution should be the last resort because our goal should be to prevent the crimes from actually happening or the events, from happening rather than just, putting people, even like going through the motions of filing a case and having someone have, showing up to court or trial, they have to take time off work and, they might not be able to do that, so they might end up losing their job. And that results in a detriment. And so we want to make sure that you're right, we're doing the right thing, and we're actually this is worth prosecuting because when I was in the city attorney's office, there's many cases that we had that were definitely not worth prosecuting. I had one case where it was an unhoused individual and he just triggered an alarm because he was sleeping by his school, and the school officer came and asked him to leave, and he wasn't leaving fast enough for him. And he ended up pepper spraying him, and he was still arrested and taken and arrested for, I think, trespass. So this was obviously a complete waste of time, because you're using up these resources to try someone for what? Because they weren't, moving fast enough. And also this poor guy was pepper sprayed. I mean,
Right.
it seems like terrible. And then I mean, we had to go to trial and a poor, like this jury had to be called in. You know, how many people, because the way a jury panel works is 75 people have to first be called in. They have
Right.
to go through the whole jury, and then we select a jury, and that takes a whole day. So somebody's, entire day has been taken out by this
Right.
trial, and then the trial itself is 5 days. So those 12 people, actually technically like 14 because we have two alternates, 14 people have to sit there for that trial. And this case shouldn't have been filed, but this goes back to the fact that like when we don't have a city attorney that has any sort of oversight or understanding of the system, we have supervisors, below them that just do what they think is right. And I often saw cases that just shouldn't have been filed, but then like the supervisor just said, well, the officer said he wants this filed.
Right.
Well, that's not the reason why we should file a case. We should file a case if it's worth the city resources and if it's like something that's important. Like I had a case with domestic violence, and that was something that I think was worth pursuing because this person, wanted to, terrorize their ex-partner's life,
Mhm.
and they shouldn't have, there has to be a consequence to that. Um,
Absolutely.
I think when there's situations when there's like, you know, rehabilitation, available or a partner, does want to participate in that, that's a different story. But this person was definitely vindictive and violent, and we have to also protect women or survivors, women or men, or people, I would say,
Right.
from that violence as well. But at the same time, everybody, having the social workers there to connect people with services, I think also provides that other outlet. But I completely agree. That's where the prosecutor's power is just whether or not we file a case. There's
Right.
also something called diversion, which allows people to do alternative things like community service and get their case dismissed. But it's not always something that works out because it can still result in jail time if someone fails to carry out those duties. So I think
Right.
ultimately we want to make sure that these cases are still, worth filing in the first
Right.
place. And a judge has to still accept the diversion as a penalty, but it's already in the penal code and is available to the city attorney to use.
Right.
But yeah, the whole point is to let's make sure we're using our resources correctly because we don't want to waste the city's resources, the city's time, and we want to make sure that this result will actually prevent or future crime or actually will protect someone. And we're not doing just something vindictively.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also I wanted to comment that from what I've seen in the city attorney's office is that there is a lot of discrimination and bias against men. And I've seen that men tend to be overwhelmingly prosecuted, especially when a man is being accused of something without even having merit. Like again, getting back to this case, like this young man was actually being stalked by this woman, but the man didn't have the opportunity to make the restraining order. He was dragged into court, didn't have enough time to prepare his case. And the fact that the city attorney, in my view as a city at a not a city as a community leader, didn't have it all there. So I believe that aside from being um, a city attorney should not only be a person of good moral character, just and for the law, but I feel that as with, people that become police officers, there should be like mental evaluations on city attorneys, so that way that when they're going to file a case or they're going to press charges, it should be done specifically because, they have to make sure that it's properly investigated, that the resources should be used to prosecute, not be used on emotion just because they feel that they want to score some type of browning points with the with the courts to try to move up their career. And I think that's what I saw with this particular city attorney in San Fernando, that she didn't really care about looking into the facts or looking into the evidence. She just wanted to make a conviction. And again, it hurts people. And I really believe that there needs to be reforms, particularly, when it comes to men being discriminated against the courts because again, like you mentioned, most of the domestic violence victims tend to be women, but then you have cases of, partners that are vindictive, or let's say someone gets obsessed with someone just because they don't want to be with them. And then, the man in particular has to fight tooth and nail to prove that he's innocent. So, we need to make it fair not only on a racial basis, but also on a gender basis, because I feel that the gender imbalance when it comes to convictions and justice tends to be flawed and more in favor towards women.
Well, I would have to say push back on that a little bit because the general vast majority of victims of violence are women, and so I think that's where that comes from. I think a bigger issue would be making sure that deputy city attorneys do, evaluate cases and make sure that there's merits before they file and prosecute them. San Fernando is a different city, by the way, apart from Los Angeles, though. But I think that's something in general that needs to be done on the training level. And that's something I
Right.
also needed. I saw when I was at the city attorney's office is like there wasn't enough training on ethics and there would often be cases where people were trying to push for convictions or push for higher charges that weren't, actually in the evidence because they just wanted, whatever they were looking for their ego or something. But it was very
Mhm.
concerning and again, if we don't have a city attorney that actually is in what's it called, applying these ethical rules and making sure they're being followed, we're not going to have, a good line attorneys and just the attorneys doing the in the courtroom following the rules. So it's really important to have really strong leadership to have that and the ethics in the office. So that's something I would want to bring because right now we don't have integrity in the office.
Mhm.
And I'm the only person that's running that actually has this experience. I'm the only person that's running that's done trials, that's worked in the criminal justice system, that's worked directly with tenants as a housing rights lawyer and worked in immigration. And that's what I want to bring. I want to bring experience to this position because that's what we really need right now. We need leadership and experience to make sure that our city is running for the people and not for, wealthy interests.
Right, exactly. And like I said, I feel that as the role of city attorney in general, they are there to be impartial and they are to serve the interests of the public. And even though they may have their personal feelings about an individual they may not like, they have to follow what the law says. The law says that, you cannot prosecute or there is no tangible evidence, they should not be given charges against. It doesn't matter how much you dislike that person as a person, because when a person is taken to court, they're not being judged by their character as a person. They're being judged by the crime or the offense that they committed. And that's another thing that I've also seen, that many city attorneys tend to judge people by their character, but not really by what they've done in terms of the crime that they committed. And that's something that there needs to be a balance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's just basically making sure that we are just filing cases that have the appropriate evidence and have been investigated properly.
Absolutely. So, when is going to be the election? Because I haven't been following the elections of city attorney. So is that going to be for next year?
Yeah, so the primary is June 2nd, and it's very, very important because we have a system where only two candidates can advance to the general election. So the primary is extremely important, especially for a grassroots candidate like me. And people can also sign up to volunteer and donate to my campaign at aidaforla.com. That's AIDA for LA.com. And they can also follow me on social media at Ida, AIDA, the number four, LA on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And they can also sign up to volunteer and sign up for my newsletter to be informed of any future events. And we do have our campaign kickoff. I don't know how soon this is going to go out, but our campaign kickoff is this Sunday, December 14th in Griffith Park at 1 p.m. and at the Crystal Springs picnic area. And then we also have a drag show by the Legion Theater on December 12th at 6:30 p.m. And so people can come to those events as well.
Nice. That's a good way to spread the word out to get people involved.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning that you are from immigrant backgrounds. Are you originally from Iran?
Yes, yes. I was born in Iran actually during the Iran-Iraq War. That was actually some of my first memories as a child. And I came here at a very young age and actually moved to a small town. Rolla, Missouri was the first place I moved to because my
Oh, wow.
family had a job there. And then we ended up coming to Loma Linda, California, actually, when
Hmm.
I was young, well, young as well, and then moved around. I was raised by a single mom, and we moved around a lot in different cities in Southern California. I grew up in Canoga Park in North Hollywood and Whittier.
I know how that is. I moved a lot when I was young. I know how that is. So are you Persian Muslim or are you part of an ethnic minority? Forgive me for asking.
I would say I'm a non-practicing Muslim. I would say, yeah, I'm culturally, I guess, I didn't really, being raised by a single mom, I wasn't really exposed to a lot of the culture and religion just because, she's working all the time. I didn't have much
Right.
family here. But yeah, culturally, I would say so.
Okay, no, the reason why I asked because most of the Persians, at least out here in Los Angeles, because I'm Jewish, but I attended I was part of the Persian Jewish community for a couple of years. I know that most of the Persians in LA, they tend to be Jewish or tend to be like ethnic minorities, not really so much Persian Muslims.
I don't know if all of them are, but I know there's a big mix of different Persians in Los Angeles. But yeah, we have a big Jewish community. I think the mayor of Beverly Hills is a Persian Jew as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes,
So
Sharana.
uh, yeah, yeah. So definitely we have like a strong showing there as well. And yeah, another civil society group representation as well.
Right. Well, anyway, Ida, we've come to the end of our time. I wanted to tell you thank you so much for being on the guest on the show. And for all the listeners that are listening to this podcast, we are on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Um, and we are a nonprofit organization. Anything that anyone donates is used to help anyone in the community. And for those that are listening, anyone that wants to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me. So as soon as I finish with the recording, I will send you the link, and you can share with all of your colleagues and friends. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, Ida.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Have a great year, night.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks.